Hey, this is Karan from San Francisco.
And this is Alex from Los Angeles. And welcome to Movies That Shaped Us, a journey of self-discovery through a shared love of film. We're two longtime friends who grew up on opposite ends of the globe with very different backgrounds, but we're both shaped and are still being shaped by the movies we see and love. In each episode, we'll cover a topic around important people, places, events, and moments in our lives, and then explore it through three of our favorite movies. We hope these movies and topics are fun and revelatory to you, just like they've been to us. So, Karan, why don't you tell the listeners what we'll be discussing today?
All right. So today our topic is movies that shaped our view of LA, Los Angeles. So Alex used to live in LA. I used to live in LA about, I want to say about 6-7 years ago, but I was there for 6 years, and it was, pretty pivotal time in my life right after business school. My first job really in the country. And honestly, so many of my passions and who I am as a person, they all came to fruition in LA. So LA is a pretty important part of my life. And in fact, the fact that you and I are friends and the fact that you and I are doing this podcast, all of it comes down to LA, honestly. So this is kind of a big deal. But I'm curious, what's your relationship to LA? And then also, how did you think about your selections for your movie list?
Yeah, so I'm in LA now, and I've moved out here for undergrad to go to college. So basically, been in LA now for about 20 years, including the time at school. So in a sense, actually, it is the place I've lived the longest in terms of in my life. Yeah, I've never been in one place as long. So, and it was very formative years. Being in college, getting my first job, then going to business school, all that stuff happened here in Los Angeles. Worked at a lot of, major entertainment companies here. So I've gotten exposed to a lot of what the quote unquote industry is here in LA. Brief time in Seattle during that 20 years. And then again, just had to come back to LA because I loved it so much. So it's definitely a pretty important city for me. And a lot of movies take place in LA, whether their plots take place in LA or whether they're filmed here. So it's definitely an exciting episode that I'm looking forward to talking about today. And for me, in terms of my approach here, it was what I thought about is, what for me, it's been at least to like to live here, and what movies best captured and shaped for me, what it feels like to be in LA, what the people are like in LA, what the culture's like in LA, all things that are very, I think, specific to LA. Like, could this movie have taken place anywhere else? Not really. It's, LA is sort of part of the film, either in the foreground or the background. So it's definitely a pretty hard episode, actually, for me. I think this easily could be a 2 or 3 parter with the amount of films that I could talk about, just again, having been here for so long. But excited to go over my top 3. What about you? How did you approach this?
Yeah, similar. And I want to kind of call out that I'm guessing this is the same for you too. But for me, these are not like my favorite or top LA movies.
Right.
This is more about, like you said, movies that have shaped my life. And so as I think about my time in LA, I think about what LA means to me. These movies kind of reflect and represent that. So excited to go into that. But yeah, we could easily do a second episode, which is about, our top 3 LA movies. So spoiler alert, Chinatown is not on this list.
Right. Yeah. None of us selected Chinatown. We haven't worked as private eyes in investigating water fraud.
Right.
Or got our noses cut. Great film, though. But yeah, that's a good thing just to point out, especially for newer listeners, that these are not our top 3 favorite movies set in LA, but the ones that shaped us the most. Great. So do you want, why don't I kick it off then with
do it.
My number 3. So my number 3 film that shaped my view of LA is 1991's LA Story. This is a film directed by Mark Jackson, written by Steve Martin, starring Steve Martin, Richard E. Grant, Sarah Jessica Parker, and Victoria Tennant, among others. A lot of cameos in this one. IMDb plot, with the help of a talking freeway billboard, a wacky weatherman tries to win the heart of an English newspaper reporter who is struggling to make sense of the strange world of early 90s Los Angeles. So this movie for me really helps capture the self-deferential humor that really does exist here. I mean, the city, I feel, and the people, and doesn't really have any kind of air of self-importance. It's also not really necessarily a cynical place. also not necessarily optimistic too much either. But compared to other like major US cities, I really do think like LA has a unique kind of brand of humor. We also do have a culture here, which is something that the movie sort of makes fun of, and a lot of people do too, of like a lack of culture in LA. But I think this movie kind of touches on some of those things, as well as going through a long list of stereotypes that I think some of them are a bit dated. I mean, I was not living in LA in 1991 or in the 90s. So some of them, like, okay, I can see this maybe landed a little bit better in 91, but a lot of these are really timeless. A lot of classic LA jokes in this film, traffic being bad, everyone being really beautiful, people caring about health. There's a scene at the restaurant where an earthquake is happening and people are like nonchalant about it because earthquakes, happen all the time here. No big deal. The making fun of California cuisine as the food everywhere you go. I also love the scene where you try to get a dinner reservation and it's kind of like getting a bank loan. Like they're looking into, your financials, but also like, are you cool enough to be attending this restaurant? And yeah, that stuff definitely exists now. I've been, there's actually a restaurant that I'm trying to go to in the next 2 weeks, like the hot place here now. I have to, get up at midnight and struggle to like get online reservations a week in advance, always selling out. So that stuff still is here. I mean, it's not like they're looking into my bank statements, but it is definitely something here. And like I mentioned too, that the sense of humor, because it's a very kind of like lighthearted sort of fantasy that Steve Martin wrote here. But this humor is, there's a sense of mocking here. Like I said, it makes fun of all these stereotypes of LA. But I feel like what Martin is doing here, it's coming from like a good place. It's not like a cynical mocking or making fun of. It's very self-deferential, which I think there's a lot of this humor that still exists now. I mean, there's a bunch of Twitter accounts I follow that are essentially just local LA jokes, making fun of, again, things like the traffic and all this kind of stuff. Like Overheard in LA and Americana at the Brand memes are two Twitter accounts that I love. So I think it really captures that, as opposed to, I contrast this to Sex and the City, a television show that I've not really seen, but for some reason, there's one episode that I keep stumbling upon in the 20 years when I stumble upon that show is when they all go to LA. And it's very much like the New Yorkers. All that they do is like rag on LA. And it's definitely like they make fun of it, but in a way that is a little more mean spirited than what Steve Martin's doing here. So I think what he does a great job in this film. And then too, like, I think, like I mentioned, there's some culture this film does a good job of capturing, and the pathos of LA too. I mean, the line that really resonates with me a lot is, I was deeply unhappy, but I didn't know it because I'm so happy all the time. It's like how he opens the film. And I do think here in LA, like
it's
people
so true.
Yeah, like so positive and happy just because the weather's great, city's great to be in. So you don't really then realize, some things in your life that might be missing. And just in terms of my relationship to this film too, like I'd actually never seen this movie until I left LA and went to Seattle. And I watched this in Seattle for the first time. And then definitely did, make me miss LA a lot and helped kind of drive me back to coming here again and moving back here. So yeah, the film, I think it's good. Like it's fun. There's a romance subplot that I don't really think, as the movie turns more into a romantic comedy, for me, it works a lot less, just lose a lot of its luster. But I do think it's a classic film that really captures the magic of Los Angeles. So I had to put it on the list.
Yeah, no, I was happy to see this one. Not surprised that you had this one exactly, because I thought of the Twitter accounts that you follow and you put this movie down on the list.
Yeah
I watched this movie maybe a few years ago, and as you know, and probably listeners know too, that for me, place and time and mood of what I'm watching and when I'm watching is pretty critical. So I think I watched it in a headspace where it sort of felt a little silly to me, and also this movie was made eons ago. So now all these jokes about food and traffic and LA, they've been done like a million times, right? Since then. So I was sort of like, oh yeah, I've already seen this, So, and I didn't even finish the movie at that time, especially as the romance part started to kick off. I was like, this is not good. Just not very good. And but then I watched it again, and I think I was able to somehow suspend all of that and just appreciate the movie for what it is. And I actually found it quite charming and quite funny. And especially now that I've had more distance from LA, it was sort of a nice reminder of some of the things that still are true for LA or about LA. And you're right, it's not mean spirited, even though some of the characters are kind of mean, like Steve
Yeah.
Martin's wife.
Oh,
I don't
girlfriend.
know
Yeah.
what is happening with her, but sure.
Yeah.
um, but the one thing that kind of resonated with me a little bit, which I don't think I even paid attention to the first time, was that there is a kind of a earnestness to the movie.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that traffic, which is the most hated part of LA, the billboard sign on the traffic freeway is sort of what is helping Steve Martin realize his true potential, what really
Right.
matters in life,
Mm-hmm.
go find his dream, love, what have you. There's kind of a sweet irony to that, I thought. And I don't know, that made me smile, that made me look at this movie in a much softer, sweeter kind of way, which I don't think I was doing the first time I
Mm.
watched it. And then also, there's a reason why they're British people and people from all over the world, because I think Los Angeles is such an international place. Like
Right.
everybody from somewhere else. Like there are very few native, LAites or
Mm-hmm.
Los Angelinos. So I thought that also, I took note of that more so than the first time I watched it. So
Hmm.
yeah, classic LA movie. Steve Martin is great. SJP is very annoying, but that's the point.
Oh, I thought she was great. I thought she was great in this. Yeah,
That's
this
the
is back when I
point.
used to really like her. But yeah, that is definitely the point. Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think Steve Martin himself was an LA trans. He didn't grow up in Los Angeles,
Right.
but this was his love letter to the city. And I think that earnestness definitely comes across. I think it's a great way to describe it, like the tone of the film for sure.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Great.
Cool.
What is your number three then?
All right. So my number three is I Love You Man from 2009, starring Paul Rudd, Jason Segel, Rashida Jones, directed by John Hamburg. Quick log line: friendless Peter Cleven goes on a series of man dates to find a best man for his wedding. But when his Insta bond with his new BFF puts a strain on his relationship with his fiance, can the trio learn to live happily ever after? I always love these log lines. This is probably better than what
Yeah.
we've seen in the past.
Yeah, it's a pretty good one. Yeah.
So I put this movie as my on my list because this movie to me represents what I went through as a brand new person moving to LA, especially after business school, which is a very social environment, not knowing that many people, and sort of the loneliness that comes with LA. It's a bright starry town, but it's very hard to meet new people, very hard to make friends, very hard to literally navigate the space because it's so vast. And I think this movie at its heart kind of gets to that. I also kind of really wanted a movie that was not full of Hollywood people, because I think when the rest of the world, or even people who are in the US but not living in LA, think of LA, all they think of is the movies, which is true. But the fact is there are a lot of regular people with regular jobs that live
Mm-hmm.
in LA that have nothing to do with Hollywood at all.
Right.
So I thought that's kind of a cool part of this movie. And also it sort of feels like it's set in a real place. Like you're going to Santa Monica, you're going to Venice, you're going to Echo Park, you're going to Santa Barbara. It sort of feels like a real place. But yeah, the storyline could have been shot anywhere, except I think the brand of people represented in this movie is very specific,
Mm-hmm.
which is Jason Segel's character, who's sort of this almost like bum person, lives in this Venice apartment, which is, kind of a shanty place. And you keep wondering throughout the movie, how do you even make money? What job do you have?
Right.
But you're kind of interesting, but super weird at the same time. And this is a very specific kind of person that I know of, that I met in LA, many of such people. So I thought
Mm-hmm.
that is a very specific LA thing. Also, if you live in LA, every once in a while you'll have a casual brush with a celebrity. So the whole Lou Ferrigno angle is
Right.
very interesting, right? Like he's trying to sell his house. That's very specific, but every once in a while you're at a restaurant, you'll meet somebody, or a friend of a friend has gone to an opening or something that has a celebrity, so you somehow have a connection to them. So that sort of stuff keeps happening in LA, which I thought is kind of cool and is presented in a very casual way, which I loved about this movie. Movie is very funny. it's, back when we were talking before our recording started, people used to spend this kind of money on making broad comedies. And I don't know how and where they spend $40 million. That said, it's really well done. It's tight. Everybody brings their A game. I don't think the chemistry between Rashida Jones and Paul Rudd really works. Like, it's an odd relationship, but maybe that's the point in some ways,
Well,
perhaps.
yeah.
But
I almost feel like they're not the romantic leads in the film.
No,
I'll get into my thoughts.
exactly. The romance is really between Jason Segel and Paul Rudd. I think their chemistry is amazing. It's also a great friendship movie. Like, I love how they meet up and how awkward it is. And not to draw another personal connection, this movie kind of makes me think of how you and I became friends.
Yeah.
We were kind of a blind man date. And, I thought that, I'll have a drink with this, so-and-so, and it'll be fun and fine. And instead we spent like 3 hours talking and had such a great time. And, cut to now, it's been what, 10 years, I guess.
Yeah.
So this movie sort of holds a special place in my heart for that too, because it sort of represents how you and I became friends.
Yeah.
But the message is, LA is daunting. It's hard, can feel unreal, can feel very difficult to navigate. But if you take a chance on the random weirdos that, are introduced to you or come by in your life, good things can come out of that. It can get stressful. It can get a little bit crazy and out there. That might be too outside your comfort zone. But in the end, it actually is going to be for the better. Because really, how do you embrace a place that you move to? You embrace it, in my mind, by being with its people. You can drive all you want in your own car and do the things that are listed on LA guidebooks or what have you, which I did as a new person. But I think you really embrace a place by meeting its weird people. And LA has a bunch of those. And I love it for that.
Yeah. I had not seen this film before.
Oh wow!
This is on the list.
This was my staple, by the way. When I lived in LA in my first few years, I've watched it like 1,000,000 times.
Yeah. I have a Jason Segel always kind of rubs me the wrong way, so I just had stayed away from this film, and I really enjoyed it. I thought it was very funny, and sort of what I was referencing earlier too. It really is a movie about a platonic romance between two men, and it just with the strength of a friendship. And a few movies I think kind of touch on this topic, and I thought this handled it incredibly well. They had fantastic chemistry, but I think your points too on this fitting into the LA experience. And we even referenced it with the LA story. Steve Martin was a transplant. A lot of people here are transplants. I don't remember exactly the backstories of these characters or whether they even talked about it, but I think a large part of the experience of being LA is coming in as a transplant. Maybe one or two people or nobody. Like when I came out here for college, I knew 0 people. Absolutely no one. I mean, it was easier, I think, for me then because I was in college environment, but I didn't know anyone. So it's a lot of that same the same feelings that the characters are going through in this film too, of like just trying to find like your friend circle, the people you like hanging out with. And I think that, rarely do films kind of touch on that. And I do think this is a very unique to the experience of LA, in a way, sort of more so than other places, at least that I've lived, in terms of the number of transplants that are here. And because the city is isolated in a way, things are so spread out, you're not, it's not like you go to New York and you're living in some shoebox apartment with 17 other people where you have to meet your roommates. Here, it's easy to kind of be alone. And that's why you need to start finding your friends. And, like you were referencing earlier too. Yeah, we were basically on a blind friend date, and that's how we met, which is a lot, what this movie deals with as well. So I was definitely glad I saw this. And I thought it was great. The one thing that was just really stood out to me was, he's trying to sell like Lou Ferrigno's house. And I think the movie came out in like 2009, 2010. Yep. He's got this beautiful giant mansion in the Hollywood Hills, and he's trying to sell it for like $4 million. And I was thinking like, wow, today that house would be like 10 to 12. And the shanty house that you mentioned, like that Segel's character lives in Venice, easily $4 million.
Oh,
Easily
absolutely.
$4 million. That even though it's like basically a teardown. So
Yeah.
it's like, wow, this film is so dated because of the real estate price references. But yeah, no, I really enjoyed this film, and I definitely can see why this was on your list for so long. Also, too, like I don't think Jon Favreau has ever looked this good in a movie. Like he looked healthy, svelte. Like his character
Yeah.
was really nasty, and he was not a good guy in the film, but
No.
man, did he look just
He
great.
looked really good. And because, you have to buy why is he with the hot blonde
Right,
woman?
right, right.
And
From My
I
Name is
was
Earl.
like,
Yeah,
sure, I guess this makes sense. And
yeah.
that's the other thing, in these kind of movies, like the supporting characters are often just like props. And even though they don't have that much screen time, but for whatever reason, I
Hmm.
think it's written really well. Like all
Yes.
these bit players who come in for a little bit, they really fill out the ensemble and they matter, like her friends, the
Hmm.
parents, Andy Samberg, whatever is happening with
Oh
his
yeah.
gym bros, like
Right.
hilarious. But
Yeah.
and this sort of fills in the whole atmosphere. And
Hmm.
again, they all feel like real people to me.
Right.
I feel
Right.
like I met these people in LA, every once in a while. So I thought that was pretty cool.
Yeah, I mean, actually, to contrast it to LA Story as well, which I think is a very heightened sense of reality
Yeah.
because that's what Martin's trying to, show LA through that. This film was very, very grounded, and very realistic.
For a
And
broad comedy,
I
especially.
know, yeah, that was actually what's most surprising to me about it. And honestly, I think that's where, the one problem of like the third act conflict that is introduced, the situation, because it wasn't like heightened enough to make it believable, because I think they were trying to keep a little bit too realistic. But I liked that realistic tone that they put in the film. It felt very grounded, and that's why the humor and the love between these two guys, I think, comes across as so genuine, because the
Totally.
film is not like a heightened sense of reality at all.
Totally.
It was great. And that the part two, and there's the classic thing in a comedy of like, oh, I need to borrow some money from you, and that's usually something that ends up bad, between two friends. It's like a classic bit in films. But I loved that this, like, he borrowed
So
money from
good.
his friend to buy billboards to promote his own business. That was so touching. And again, it's
So
like that's
sweet
something you
and
see in a
so good.
romance and a love story, but it's between these two platonic. I was, yeah, very, very touching. Great film. Definitely recommend people checking this out. Maybe it was overlooked back in the day. I think it was a pretty decent box office hit when,
$70 million.
yeah, when they were trying to make,
Yeah,
Rudd and Siegel both were really hot at the time. But I definitely recommend people checking it out if they haven't seen it.
I agree. And it's sort of a good playbook for a good romantic comedy, right? Like romantic
Yeah.
comedies can be broad, but they don't have to be unreal or dumb. You can
Right.
do the work to make them real and grounded, and it'll just shine your humor,
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. Please take note, comedy,
Yeah.
right? And
Yeah.
producers really.
Yeah. It's much harder to do for sure. And when
Yeah.
it succeeds, I mean, it just the quality of your output is much better.
Yeah. All right. What's your number two?
So my number two film is Ed Wood from 1994, directed by Tim Burton, starring Johnny Depp, Martin Landau, Bill Murray, and Sarah Jessica Parker again. So I have two films from her on this
Wow.
list. The plot summary here is ambitious but troubled movie director Edward D. Wood Jr. tries his best to fulfill his dreams despite his lack of talent. So this film I put on the list because I think it does a great job of, for me at least, reflecting so much of what makes the people of LA unique. Their sense of culture, which is really just full of creative people. Like, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
there's people here that do other jobs, but every dentist has a screenplay. Every
Right.
it's like so many people here. Even if you're not in the industry, you kind of dream of being a part of it. But most of these people that are out here to strike it big don't make it. The majority of them don't make it. But they're coming out here because they have that passion for what they do, even if they're not really even good at it, like the director in this film. So this is a biopic of a real director, Ed Wood, who is a famous director, or later famous for making some of the worst movies ever made. So I don't know if folks have seen like Plan 9 from Outer Space. That's his most famous one. But he was basically a B movie exploitation film director in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And then after he passed away in the 80s, with the dawn of VHS and video culture, he was sort of like resurrected and appreciated for what he was doing. And I think what this movie does is, again, Ed in this film really represents the heart of the artists who come to LA. Like, these are people that are innocent. That's really what Ed represents. He has a passion and energy and drive, and he believes that he is going to be successful, even though if everyone around him is telling him that he's terrible, and his movies, yeah, they are actually objectively bad.
Mm-hmm.
There's a scene where he's talking to a financier, and he's like, "I just paid for this movie, and this is the worst movie I've ever seen." And Ed Wood's like, "Well, I promise my next film will be better." And it's like this like optimism here that so much of LA, despite like the grind of, you know, coming in here and trying to make it, quote unquote, in Hollywood, is really difficult. So many of the people that I've met who've come in, they don't kind of get dejected or cynical. They just keep at it because they love what they do and they love that craft. But then B, they just believe in themselves. And I think those are two things that just, you know, you might not be the next Steven Spielberg, but I mean, honestly, even if you're, you know, the next Ed Wood and making movies, I think that, you know, that is really all that, you know, all that you need. I think, you know, there's also a couple other points that this movie does a good job of kind of making. You know, it's a great tribute to old classic Hollywood. So in the film, Ed befriends Bela Lugosi, who was a huge star in the 30s with Dracula, but he's now been cast aside. And I think this is symbolized a lot in LA, where, you know, there's definitely some people in LA that have reverence for the past, but at the same time, people I feel like don't also have a sense of history here. It's all about what's happening now. Are you hot now? What's the next thing you have? It's like looking at the present, but even more so the future, not so much about your past, which is nice in a way. It's not like, you know, other places where it's like, oh, who's your family from? What have you done before? And that's how you're measured. You're measured by how are you performing now and how are you performing in the future. So then you get people like Bela Lugosi that, you know, again, fell in hard times. He's a drug addict in the film. It's really, really sad, but Ed gets, he does appreciate him because he loves his old films. And I think that does a really good job of capturing that. The people in LA that are here for a sense of, have that sense of history, even though the city is so much focused more on like what's trendy now and what's trending in the future. And the other big thing I think this movie touches on that I definitely feel from the people in LA too, that, you know, a lot of these folks, especially the artists, they're all outsiders, right? They've come from their various small towns or other cities where they were maybe like the weird art kid or the kid who was like the outcast. And this is where you come, where all the outcasts kind of come, who are interested at least in making art. So, you know, Ed himself is a cross-dresser. So that sort of makes him an outsider. He, you know, is basically his cast of people he's making films with, or, you know, a failed TV host, you know, a wrestler, you know, a bunch of just like rejected, you know, people from mainstream Hollywood. It's like band of misfit toys basically are together trying to make a film. And I think that is definitely something that you really do get a sense of here in LA, of people that are coming to find their people. And if you're an artist, this is definitely like a town where you're finding your people. You know, I think this movie does a great tribute that not everyone is going to make it, right? But this film is about the people that try. Though, you know, in a way, the movie does have a happy ending with, they kind of, you know, change history a little bit and make, you know, the screening at the end of Plan 9 go really well. And, you know, just knowing that Ed, at least after his death, is now looked back upon as an important filmmaker, even though he made bad films. And the film itself is you know, you got a biopic made after you. Like, that's making it in a way that, you know, even if you don't do it in your life, like, you know, you just keep at it and have that positive attitude, you can succeed in that way. So, yeah, I just felt this movie, it's one of my favorite movies. Tim Burton, actually, director, I don't think we've talked about yet, is definitely one of the most important directors to me, for sure, in terms of my falling in love with film and influence on me growing up. And I think this is one of his best films, and really a film that to me just captures LA in a way that is not done in a lot of other films.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And so you recommended this movie to me and had been for years and years. And I finally watched it a few years ago. And I think I texted you right after how blown away I was with this movie. Because, you know, when I hear the name Tim Burton, as much as I like his movies, but there's a sense of like fantasy and such, which is just not my genre, as we've established in the past. I think this is probably his most grounded movie, and in my mind, maybe his best movie.
Yeah, I can totally see that.
It's just so well done, and like everything you said, I totally agree with it. I would just add the friendship between Martin Landau and Johnny Depp's character is just so amazing. You know, speaking of friendship movies, like this is a great friendship movie as well. And like you were saying, right, that LA can be quite harsh in terms of judging people for where are you from, where do you live, what car do you drive. All of these things seem to matter, but then that's the beauty of LA because it's so big. There are all kinds of people. You do find the purists who just have a connection with somebody, even though they are a total loser, but they
Right.
connect because they connect on some creative thing that they are both fans of, or there's mutual admiration, or even unidirectional admiration because they really revere the work that they've done in the past. And I think
Hmm.
that this movie does such a great job. And then also, like you were saying, it brought a smile to my face just watching these people create something,
Right.
ultimately that's the prize.
Uh-huh.
Of course everybody wants to make it big and have their work celebrated in some ways, but I just keep thinking I made short films, so I know how hard it is. The fact that they are just in a room together making something,
Right.
that is the prize to me. And I don't know, that made me really happy. So this is a great comfort movie, sits very well in my sort of melancholy space of
Uh-huh.
movies that I like. So yeah, and also probably Johnny Depp's best performance, I
Oh,
think.
yeah, I mean, definitely one of his best. I think this was when he was firing on all cylinders in the
Yeah,
90s. And yeah, this is a fantastic performance. And Morton Landau as well, who was got
Oscar
Oscar
winner.
recognition, yeah, for his performance there. But yeah, you're right. The friendship in this movie is very special. And another thing in LA, I think that is important to kind of like find your crowd, find your friends. Much like in
Mm-hmm.
I Love You Man too, that helps you
Mm-hmm.
kind of navigate, especially in the industry. Like if you're in Hollywood, it's all about helping each other and which again, Johnny Depp here or Ed Wood is helping out his friend Bella try to continue to make films, even though he's way past his prime and has all
Yeah.
these drug
And vice
problems.
versa, right? With
Right,
Bella's
true.
name on it, he is somehow able to get this thing made.
Yeah, they both benefit. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, just a fantastic film. Um, okay, so what about your number two?
All right. So my number two is Mildred Pierce from 1945, starring Joan Crawford, Jack Carson, and Blythe, directed by Michael Curtiz. Quick logline: a hardworking mother inches towards disaster as she divorces her husband and starts a successful restaurant business to support their spoiled daughter. So I put this movie on my list because, like you were saying a little bit, to me, LA is also a big town of just hustling.
For
This is a
sure.
place where people, like we've been saying, are from everywhere. Most people are not born with a silver spoon. Most people didn't have their parents in the movie business or had made it big. So you got to figure stuff out. And I think this movie does a really good job of showing that. But it's very specific to LA in terms of the kinds of things and people Joan Crawford's character, Mildred, has to kind of deal with. So, on one hand, she's sort of speaking to her own passions for pie making and cooking, but also just necessity because she has to make things work because she has two kids and
Right.
is divorced. So it's sort of amazing to watch, especially a movie from that time, a single mother really kind of take matters in her own hands, make this thing work. Deal with all the men in her life, and establish a successful restaurant business. But on the other hand, this movie also shines such a great light on the people who are image conscious, the people who always want more, the people who care about where do you live, what car do you drive, and that's her daughter, and that's
Oh yeah.
Monty Barragan, the guy who shows up, who's kind of two timing with the mother and the daughter, which is gross. But that's also kind of life. And I think this movie really shows the conflict between both these people. And even though Mildred has built this whole successful empire, this is the seductive quality of LA because there's always this kind of shining star in front of you that it could be more, it could be better.
Hmm.
You, even though you've made it, you don't know that you've made it, and you'll throw it all away because you're trying to please somebody, in this case her daughter. So it's such a brilliant movie. On the face of it, it could just be a stereotypical noir movie and you could totally just lay back and enjoy that, but I think this movie has lots of deep themes. And for me, I think it's of personal relevance because I actually lived in Glendale and
Mm.
I watched this movie when I lived in Glendale. And it sort of has this thing, right? That, oh, Vida, the daughter, is like, yeah, I hate Glendale. I would never want to live over here. Who lives here? And it's always about how do you leave Glendale for a better life. And that's another very LA specific thing, that the neighborhood or city that you live in or micro city that you live in kind of seems to define who you are. And
Definitely.
even though you're the exact same person, suddenly if you were living on the west side, apparently you're better.
Yep.
Which
Yep.
I did move to the west side, and I was perceived to be better. So there you
Yeah.
go.
Yeah, it's all about the first three letters of your phone, or your phone number, like, or not
Right.
letters, numbers. If you get that coveted 310 phone number, that's
Oh
what
gosh.
that makes all the difference.
Yep. So yeah, brilliant movie, beautifully shot. Obviously, Michael Curtiz, great performances. Joan Crawford's only Oscar, famously accepted from her bed, which I just love. And again, Joan, she's kind of become this caricature. Another reason why I don't like Ryan Murphy, because that's how he presented her in his show. But what a great star, what a great performance, what a great career, spanning from silent movies to being who she became. So I don't know, this movie hit me right at the time when I was getting into the filmography of these actresses from the 30s and 40s, her, Betty Davis, Barbara Stanwyck, noir. So it's just a great compilation of all of that for me. So I could have put any number of LA noir movies, and we might go over some of them in our what didn't make the list. But to me, it all starts here. And the last thing I'll say is that if anybody's curious about this movie or they like this movie, I would highly encourage you to watch Todd Haynes's miniseries on HBO of the same name, starring Kate Winslet, where they really go deep into what happened. And because this is a movie, so they didn't
Right.
cover every aspect of the famous book, but that series I watched the whole thing twice, and it's absolutely amazing. So that's Mildred Pierce, number 2.
Yeah, I am glad you put this on the list. I have been wanting to watch this movie for like 20 years and just
Oh,
never
wow.
got around to it. And it just was as good as I was expecting it to be, if not better. Just a fantastic noir film, performances up and down, perfect. Interesting you talk about Joan Crawford too. Just now just thinking, it wasn't necessarily as extreme, but a similar kind of parallel to the Bela Lugosi story too, in terms of being kind of washed up, trying to come back as an older woman in some horror films at the end, and then was basically a recluse and passed away. But a fantastic actress. So yeah, like for me, I think I'm glad we're putting a film noir film on here. None of my films that I have on my list are film noirs, and I just associate that genre so much with Los Angeles.
Totally.
So many of the best film noirs are all set in LA, and I picture LA in the 40s and 50s just looking like film noir.
Basically,
like,
exactly.
Very, there's no lights back then, I guess.
Yeah, when she's on the pier in the beginning of the movie, I'm like, oh, this is probably how it looked like.
Yeah. So you definitely definitely true about where you're from in LA, even like the city defining you. It's funny too. After this, I'm like, oh, I wonder if like that house is still there. And I found like a YouTube video of where you can go to the house that they shot this film at. And it looks exactly the same, just the palm tree's taller. So it's kind of cool to see that. Maybe I'll go up to Glendale and check that out in person. But I thought the film was great. Especially like the gender dynamics are really interesting too. Where I think Mildred is trying to, or she successfully like uses men throughout the film to gain her independence from them, and uses money as well. Like to her, money represents freedom and independence, versus her daughter, which I think just views it as success in and of itself. Oh, if I have money, then that's all that I want, just money, and that's what's really driving her, even to the cost of everyone around her. And for some reason, Mildred. I guess not for some reason. She's a mother, so she has to, once feels like she needs to care for her child. But definitely like the daughter takes advantage of everyone in her life to try to get ahead, especially like her mom. Just a great, especially at the time, to have a film with such a rich female character and character arc. It's just great to see this. So very glad you, as a sense, like gave me an excuse to sit down and watch Mildred Pierce. I just loved it.
I'm glad you did. And I think this is why there's a bit of a specific LA thing here. I guess, a bratty teenager who wants more money and wants more things can happen anywhere. But
right.
I don't know if it will land on Mildred the way it does in this movie had it not been set in LA, because this is not just Vita. This is everybody around her too,
Right.
and it's sort of heightened. And I love that we don't see that. We just see it all through channeled through Vita. But it's probably happening across the board where, people just want more and more. Like this movie could literally be made now where the daughter is some influencer.
Oh, for sure.
And wants to join some, hotshot Venice TikTok house, and is, and we know how that story goes. So
Right.
I kind of feel like this movie is timeless in that aspect.
Yeah, I mean, I think, to your point about being in LA, because, entertainment and trying to make it big and be a star, quote unquote, right, is so much of a part of some people who are here in this city. And I think because her daughter is trying to get money, but she wants to be a famous singer, and like that is something that is unique to this city too, that entertainment slice of it, even though we barely see it. It's sort of because the movie is so much about Mildred that we don't really see Vita trying to go off necessarily and like do auditions, and that would have turned into a different movie, I think.
Right.
And maybe the book expands on that. I've not.
And the TV show does that.
Right.
I highly recommend it. But yeah, you do hear her sing in the movie on the radio, which I remember the first time I watched the movie, I was like, oh, she's actually good, because you're so caught up in just her chase for fame and success that I was sort of like, I don't even know if you're good for anything, but she is actually good, which actually makes it doubly heartbreaking that you're actually good at this. So you don't have to be so mean and awful.
Right.
You can earn this. You got gifted, so anyway.
Yeah. Great film for sure. Great film.
All right. What is your number one?
So my number one movie that shaped my views on LA is 2004's Collateral. And this is directed by Michael Mann, starring Tom Cruise, Jamie Foxx, and Mark Ruffalo. Logline.
Jada.
That's right. Jada as well. Yep. Logline, a cab driver finds himself the hostage of an engaging contract killer as he makes his rounds from hit to hit during one night in Los Angeles. This film, and why I had to put it for number one for me, is I think this film, more than any other that I've seen, really captures the mood, the look, and the vibe of LA, especially how LA looks at night, is very unique to this city. Like it is so sprawling. There are so many then lights that are on at night, that it sort of gives this weird glow to the sky, this purple glow. Like it never really gets dark here, but at the same time, unlike a city like a New York that quote unquote never sleeps, like LA is dead at night. There is no one out. It is deserted, but it is very bright. It's just this odd feeling. I think what Michael Mann does so beautifully, at least in the visuals here, is that because he's shooting, this is the first film, I don't want to say the first film he experimented with digital. There might have been another one previous to this, but definitely a lot of this is his experimenting around with digital photography, which when this movie came out in 2004 was definitely on the cutting edge. They hadn't really figured it out yet. So today, most films are shot digitally, but they don't necessarily have a digital film look to it. And this was a film where the scenes that he does shoot digitally definitely look very digital. Like there's you see a very great the depth of field. You can really see in the background of so many shots, like the downtown LA skyline, which is again is something that is always sticking up for most places in LA, that you can see that back there. And because you've shot a digital, that can then come across. So I think for that, for sure, like visually, like I've never seen a movie that makes you feel like you're in LA for that reason. Also this is a movie that, like the logline describes, about a cab driver who's taking around Tom Cruise as his killer. So much of the movie takes place in a car and driving around. And I feel that, LA, you do spend most of your time in the car. And the city, as Tom Cruise describes it in the film, is a disconnected sprawl, which is definitely true. And because they're going to all these different parts of LA that are all so different and so unique, I think that is something too. This film captures that multicultural side of LA as well. Like you go to a African American jazz club, you're going to a nightclub in Koreatown, then you're going to like this bar where a bunch of the Latinos are hanging out. So you're really seeing like LA. There's so many of these little pockets of multiculturalism and all these different cultures and subcultures that come to LA and that are part of this city. It's definitely a web of all these different subcultures, which again, this film does a really good job with as well. There's also the classic LA talking about how to get places and arguing over, oh, you take this road to this road to this road, like they mock in the Californians, that famous SNL skit. This is back in 2004 opening scene. Him and Jada are debating over what the fastest way is to get from, I think they were picking her up at LAX to get to downtown. And that's something like, you do talk about that. You show up at a party and the first thing is, oh, how'd you get here? Oh, I took this to this to this. Oh, interesting. I took this to this. It's just part of living here. So I think on the lighter side of that movie does that too. But, then in terms of themes of this film, I think it also captures, the different types of personalities in LA. So like Jamie Foxx is a cab driver, but he has this dream of having a limo company. Mm-hmm. He's got his little, in the visor in his cab, like an island. He's like, this is my dream. I sit here and I think about this, right? So he's a dreamer. A lot of people do come to LA and they dream of things. But he's had this dream for 12 years and he hasn't done anything about it. And there's a lot of people here too that are these dreamers, but they never take action on it, whether they're afraid to fail or whether it's just like they always have to have some excuse of why they're not actually writing that screenplay or going out to that audition. It's like excuse upon excuse. And then you have Tom Cruise, who is this like contract killer that is driving around with Jamie Foxx. And he is very type A, very driven. He's like, look, I'm doing this, boom, boom, boom. He takes action. And there's definitely that type of personality here too in LA, those hard driving, like have that list, get things done. And, that's actually in the film, Tom Cruise in a way like inspires Jamie Foxx to take action. Like at the end, he's saving the girl, he's killing the villain. So he's actually able to, do something with his life for the first time, inspired by Tom Cruise. And definitely like I've met both of these types of people in LA too, that are just, might have talent or there's this dream, but they never act on it. And then the people that are all that they're doing is acting. So, again, for all these different reasons, I feel that this film is a perfect encapsulation of all the different sides and aspects of LA. And, every time I watch it, you feel like you're out in LA at 2 a.m. on the streets. And I just don't think any other movies really ever captured that since, and the film just overall is fantastic. I mean, Michael Mann, this might even been the first Michael Mann movie we talked about so far on the podcast. One of my favorite directors, masterpiece after masterpiece. And this one I just think is so tight. And rewatching it for this movie, it's like nothing is wasted. It's so just a tight little thriller, fantastic acting across the board by Fox, and especially Tom Cruise is just dynamite in this thing. And just a great film, but one that I think really does make me feel, even if I'm not in LA, I watch this, I feel like I'm there.
I'm not surprised this is your number one, because I know visual expression is sort of number one for you always when it comes to movies. So I couldn't agree more. Like visually, this movie captures LA, and especially LA at night in such a beautiful way. And it's not by accident, because I think there's something dark, seductive about nights. And we're talking about noir, right? There's a reason why LA is all noir. And I think this is in many ways sort of a modern day noir. I don't think it's classified as a neo-noir, but it could be.
Oh, actually. Yeah, totally. Yeah, no, I can see that.
Yeah. So I think that's all beautiful. The whole driving around, different communities, traffic, all of that is sort of perfect. It's a great thriller. Like you said, super economical, edge to edge, you're on your seat and you're totally happy watching it. On the thematic side, again, I don't think the script or the movie makers are actually going for anything, which is totally fine. Like not everything has to be, super deep and such. There's a little bit of what you highlighted, which I think resonates with me as well. But yeah, I like this movie a lot, but I have to kind of just put a pin on deeper questions and also just the overarching plot and story and such. Like, why are you still here with this guy? And
Jamie, you mean? Like, why is Jamie
still? Why are you still here? And even the whole thing of him trying to save Jada, and the fact that Jada was the one at the beginning who he was trying to pick up from the airport, and then she's the one. That's convenience. There's a lot of these sort of things, which they don't bother me, but I just try to kind of put a pin on it. If it were not for those things, like this movie would be kind of in the A+A tier for me. I think when it comes to Michael Mann, I think Heat probably is to me in that tier.
It's better, it's a better
film. I
film.
Watched it in like a million years.
That film holds up too. Another LA classic,
Another LA classic, exactly, which I almost considered putting on this list. But yeah, that said, great watch. everyone's great, especially Tom Cruise, like you said. And I was
Mhm.
thinking about this, that, we talk about Tom Cruise now in a very different light. This is probably him at the height of his powers, or
Oh yeah.
saying he's had many, many innings. Definitely one of the innings where he was at the height of his powers, to accept a role like this where you're just outright bad,
Oh yeah.
doing terrible actions, but then bring some humanity to that role. I don't think there's much written there, to be honest. Like, there
Hmm.
isn't much
On
depth to
him.
these characters,
Mhm.
and that to me is what the lacking part is. But you see a lot in his physicality and how he, communicates with him. The scene in the hospital with Tom Cruise and Jamie Foxx's mother, that, there are moments like that which, really tells you a lot about who he is. And but I think it's him doing most of that work, but I just applaud him for even taking a role like this, because he really saw it. And of course, his desire to work with the best of the best, which he's
Right.
done for his career. So yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, I think, yeah, Tom and what he's able to bring to this role makes Vincent, the character, like kind of sympathetic. Like you're
Yeah.
rooting for him, even though he's going around killing,
Yeah.
people on screen like this in vicious ways. Like you do get kind of sad at the end when he gets killed. Because there's a glimpse at his backstory, maybe with his dad, but you're not even sure whether that's true or not. But to your point, I think it all comes through in Tom's performance. Like he's able to give you enough where you care about him as a character,
Yeah.
and he's not just like a Terminator sort of going around
Totally. Otherwise, this movie
assassinating.
fails. Like, you
Agree.
cannot be sitting with these people in a car if you don't
Totally.
care. I would, me, I would leave the theater.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, to your point, or to our points, even in the last couple movies we talked about, it's that friendship in a way. It's like a friendship develops between
Yeah.
these two folks. And he helps Jamie Foxx with his mom and gives him these inspiration. Like he's trying to help him for some reason. He doesn't have to. I mean, maybe he's doing it because he wants to make sure Jamie Foxx doesn't run away and, endear himself to him a little bit so that he can continue to drive. I mean, there might be other reasons that, but I think that's why the character is kind of complex, but there's still that friendship element too, which is a theme that's been through a number of our films that develops between these two guys, even though it ends tragically for one of them. But yeah, just a great film.
It really is.
Okay, so your number one film about Los Angeles. What are we looking at?
All right. So I think I might have a bit of an obvious one here. Maybe not. But my number one is La La Land from 2016, starring Emma Stone, Ryan Gosling, directed by Damien Chazelle. Quick logline: while navigating their careers in Los Angeles, a pianist and an actress fall in love while attempting to reconcile their aspirations for the future. So I'll say this at the top of my head, the top of my description of this is that there are many flaws in this movie, and I've sort of had like a interesting hot and cold relationship with this movie over time. But I still ended up putting this movie at my number one because of two reasons. One, I think to me, LA, despite everything that we've talked about, the hustle, the loneliness, all of it, and you said this as well, it is a city of dreams. And I think this movie just captures that very beautifully. And dreams, sometimes the broken ones and the fulfilled ones, regardless, it's a city of dreams. And I haven't seen that many movies that really show LA and its topography and its natural beauty in this kind of heightened way. And it's actually not that heightened because LA is very beautiful. I don't think most people know that or even think of that. But when you drive around, if you can just look above the strip malls and see the trees and the hills and what have you, it's actually really, really beautiful. And I think this movie does a great job of highlighting the everyday walkways, but also, Griffith Observatory and the monumental places of LA as well. So that's why I put this movie on the list, really. But yeah, going back to the whole dream thing, I think this is really Emma Stone's movie and her character and her trials and tribulations. But also, like we were talking about Bela Lugosi and Ed Wood, I think, yes, there's, commercialism and what's hot and what's current, but sometimes people who are purists and care about, what they're here in LA to do, which is pursue their passions, they do come together. And I think what this movie shows is that can be good, but it doesn't always end well either, because ultimately the dream that you're chasing or seeking wins. And in
Mm-hmm.
some ways, yeah, you'll meet people who will see you for that dream and support you and help you in that journey, but that's short lived, because ultimately you have to go for your dream yourself, and you need a different kind of partner or person to support you in that dream who probably doesn't have a similar dream like you know. And we've seen so many movies in a stereotypical way, Star is Born, what have you, where between a couple, one person's dreams overshadow the other. I don't think this is that. I think they both end up doing just fine, but I love that there's sort of two ships crossing in the night, and they're there together for a certain moment of time. They both gain something from each other, and then they move on and do their own thing, and they have different lives. And there's something, I don't know, poetic about that. On the flip side, though, I think what doesn't work about this movie to me is the romance. It's obviously trying to steal and build on classic musicals like Singing in the Rain and such, and maybe it's unfair to even compare this with that, but to me, the whole Griffith Observatory sort of dream sequences and such, I always found them very boring. And I don't know, not that I know Damien Chazelle, I'm sure he's a lovely, lovely person, obviously very talented, but when I watch his interviews and think about him, I get angst and nervousness and drive and all of that, but not love and romance, which is why I think to me, Whiplash feels like a summation of this person. And this movie, when it's kind of touching on those feelings of kind of angst and striving hard, it sort of is a 10 on 10. But the love story between the two, and maybe Ryan Gosling in some ways channeling Damien Chazelle of being sort of this alien-like person, which I feel like what Ryan Gosling has become now in all of his movies, which maybe that I don't know. Clearly I'm not joining that party, because people obviously love him and I like him too, but I think there's something in his performance, something in the love between them that doesn't quite work. But then maybe that's the point. Maybe it was never supposed to be that lovey-dovey, although I don't think the movie makers want you to feel that. They want you to be swept off your feet, literally,
right,
the way the two characters are in that scene. And I don't. And that to me is the flaw of the movie. But other than that, great score, beautifully shot. I think he deserved Best Director. I mean, we talk a lot about, the future of film, and sometimes easy to overlook, where are the great movie makers? And I think we have some great ones, and Chazelle is definitely in it. I can't wait for Babylon this year. It's going to be amazing, I'm sure. So, but yeah, for the dreams itself, I think this movie is number one for me.
Yeah, interesting points you raise about Damien. I mean, he's not an LA native, from New York, East Coast guy. And I definitely, now that you're saying all these things, I can, in looking back at the movie, it does seem like it's like a New Yorker kind of writing about LA technical in a way. Yeah, right. Which is, but interesting. So this is a film I had not seen before the podcast. It came out, it was one of those movies, I think I've talked about this before, where it didn't really look like appealing to me. So it was on a list. I was trying to see it because it was a nominated for the Oscars. And when it didn't win Best Picture, it fell off my list of things I wanted to see. But at some point I knew I wanted to return to it. This is also around a time when I had left LA to move to Seattle. And I was like, I don't know if I want to watch a movie that's supposed to be like, a movie that makes you miss LA when I'm not there. I'm like, I'm probably not emotionally ready to watch this. I'll kind of, again, use that as a reason not to see it. So I had never actually seen it before. And yeah, I have to say that there were a lot of things that, well, first of all, just about LA, we'll start there. I think it does do a great job of capturing, it's got the good parts and the bad parts. It does the traffic thing, the crazy parking rules. You always worry about your car getting towed, but it
Prius,
also
everybody.
And Prius, everyone's in the Prius. Exactly. Right. So that definitely feels, very realistic. But it's, there's also, it shows the Griffith Observatory, and it looks really great, and like home in the Hollywood Hills. And it definitely romanticizes the film, but in a way that is, they clearly shot it on location. So it's like, it's the real LA, but the real LA is looking really nice.
It's a dream. That's what the movie is.
Yeah, but I was somehow thinking that they would take a decision to maybe make the movie or the city look unrealistically beautiful, but instead, to your point, it looks realistic, beautiful at the same time. And I thought that was just really blew me away on that. It touches on the different types of, the artists that are trying to make it right in the two main characters, but also all the LA, annoying movie people, fake people at like the parties. And that is definitely something
The
in LA, like the sellouts, right? Or whatever you want to call them, right? You go to these parties and you're meeting all these different types of people. And I think this movie is definitely like a checklist of LA stereotypes that does a great job of capturing that. And I also, similar to a theme, I think at Ed Wood, there's a line in this movie. I can't remember who says it, but like, oh, people in LA like worship everything but value nothing.
Yeah, Ryan says
like
that.
I was like, that is true, in the same way in Ed Wood, where it's like you care about the now, so you're worshiping the success, but you don't really care about the film history and what Bella did. So I think that is definitely very true. I'm like, wow, that actually is a lot of what LA is like. Transplants again, right? These are both the main characters of transplants, and I think that is a very key thing to LA. So yeah, I think in terms of LA movies, just a great job of capturing a realistic romance of the city. It's not like Steve Martin's LA Story that is very heightened and like a fantasy world, even though it's again touching on real things, or is grounded as, or is realistic as like Collateral, which looks like could be happening right now. I think this does a great job of striking the balance, and the way he's able to bring out, like in certain scenes especially, this sort of like 3-strip Technicolor look. I know he's trying to pay tribute to these 40s 50s musicals, and I think visually just fantastic. Like production design's great. I think he does some incredible stuff too with the camera and cinematography. So yeah, I think a good LA movie in that respect. In terms of the things that I didn't work for me, like it's a musical, and I judge musicals by, are the songs any good? And I think the songs are across the board not good. Like I didn't think the music was any good. That's fair, yeah. But for me, none of the songs
I
worked.
like the songs a lot, actually.
And man, the dancing was like embarrassing. Like it was actually kind of hard. That sequence you mentioned, where they go to the Griffith Observatory, and there's this sort of a Fred Astaire dream-like dance sequence.
Gosh. Yeah.
Oh man, like can Ryan Gosling and Emma Stone, they cannot dance at all, and it was so hard to watch. And I was like, oh no, this is like I'm embarrassed for you. Like, please stop. So that was tough.
I would watch her for sure, but him, that's the thing. Like, the steps don't have to match you, and the steps don't even have to be great. But if you put a smile on your face and you show that you actually love what you're doing, you can sell it. And the fact that he has chosen to be this sort of sad, brutish sort of person, it just, then all you can do is watch his footwork.
Yeah. And man, that was all the dancing was embarrassing. And the singing was not great, but at least it's like, okay, fine. They're actors, they're singing. That's okay. But the dancing for some reason, like kind of put me off. But I will say that the movie overall, like as I was watching, I was like, yeah, this is fine. Like it's not really landing for me until like literally like the last 5 minutes. And there's a scene at the end, which you kind of hint at, where essentially these two, they meet in LA, they form a romance. They both have careers that take them in different directions. So then they break up. And then at the end, they run into each other again. And there's a fantastic fantasy sequence of like what their life could have been like.
Brilliant.
Right? Like if they had been able to, it's like the classic Hollywood ending of the romance works and your career. You get both, right? And it's this, what their beautiful life would have been like. And essentially the choice that they had to make was career over love, and they chose career. And both of them did. And both of them had the success in the ways that they wanted, but they had to sacrifice their relationship with each other. And I think that is something in LA too, that, it's not a city that you think of a lot when it's like represents romance. It's Paris, definitely, the city of love. And like, definitely there's a romanticism in New York, and a lot of good romances can happen there because there is that sense. I can't really describe it so much in New York, but there is that sense of there's that love story that you can have there. LA, I don't know. It doesn't really come across so much as like a city that represents,
because
like
you're driving always.
Yeah, it's like it's not that love. And I think what this movie does a really good job of showing is that, like you have to make sacrifices if you want success, and you come to LA because you want that success, and your career is what's important, not in a sense of like climbing a ladder or any kind of like New York got to make it rich. It's like, no, I want to put great art out in the world and be a successful artist. And they make decisions where the art is more important than their love. And they kind of compromise on their love because they don't want to compromise on their art. And I thought that was really touching, very, very moving. And I thought something that I've not seen reflected in films very often, to your point earlier too. And even the movie kind of comments on that. It's like, oh, if this movie was made in the 50s, we would have been falling in love. We've both been successful. We're happily married with kids, and we both have careers. You know what? That's not how the world works. And I thought that that to me, like literally the last 5 minutes of this movie saved it for me in terms of being a meh film into like, this movie was great. And I'd watch it again, even though I'd skip past all the dancing. So I'm glad that you had this on your list. I think it's a great summation of a lot of the themes we talked about on this podcast already in terms of LA. And it is a movie that, captures so much of the city in such a great way that I'm glad I finally did, decide to come to it and then get to the end too, because my opinion would have been very different if you had caught me like an hour into the movie.
I'm glad you finished it. And I'm glad. Yeah, I think this movie kind of, with the whole Oscar thing and what have you.
Oh, right. That's true.
That's what it was known for. But I think over time, hopefully it'll find its audience back. The movie made $170 million.
It's a huge hit. Huge hit. Yeah.
And again, we keep ignoring the fact that, popular movies that are well made make money. Yeah. They do. They make them.
And a musical too.
Musical. Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Crazy that it made so much
amazing.
money.
And this was just like a few years ago. So,
yeah.
On the love part, there is that sort of trade-off between career versus love. But I actually think that, like what I was saying earlier, I don't think this was an everlasting love to begin with. I think this love was very much of that time and moment where they both needed help and support to kind of really go for it.
Right.
Because like you were saying earlier, in case of Jamie Foxx's character, I don't know if the two of them were really acting. I mean, they were doing something, they're going to auditions and such, but they weren't really acting on what they, should be pursuing. And cut to, she's writing her own one-woman play.
Right.
And she's doing it. So I don't think this was a timeless love, really. But I agree. There's a trade-off that has to be made for sure.
Yeah, you make an interesting point on that too. That I think the movie does a great job of capturing, which again is sort of different. I feel that success in LA, right? It's yes, obviously, like you as an individual, you're the actress that makes it, or you're the writer, but it's not just you. Like you cannot make it on your own. You literally can't. Unlike in other industries or other cities, the story of, pick yourself over your bootstrap, succeed on your own. You need that support system. And I think what this movie does a great job, kind of to your point of, Ryan pushes Emma, who also pushes Ryan in their career pursuits. And if they hadn't met each other, they probably both would have moved back to their, wherever they were from.
Yeah,
and that was leaves. It. They need it. So this movie does a great job of sort of showing that it takes, yes, it's your talent, but it can't just be your talent alone. It does take a village, much like in Ed Wood again, like that entire cast of characters comes together to create something. And all the movies you touched on with friendship, and even like your mention of Collateral with Tom Cruise and, inspiring Jamie Foxx. Like I think success in LA, you need people around you to do that. And I think that this movie does a good job of showing that too, kind of what you touched on there. I hadn't really realized that before, but another reason why I think the movie is good for LA.
I'm glad you liked it. Was there anything else that didn't make your list?
Yeah, like I said, this one was really tough. Very, very hard. So Swingers was like, it pained me not to include it. I almost wanted to text and be like, can we put 4? Because I have to put Swingers on here. Oliver Stone's The Doors, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, Robert Altman's The Player, Magnolia, Big Lebowski, Showgirls. Even though it's not set in LA, I have a very good case to be made why that's the best movie about the entertainment industry that's ever been made. Mulholland Drive, and then Born in East LA, which is a film by Cheech of Cheech and Chong. Highly recommend. Even just the theme song to this movie is the best song about LA that's ever been written. And then the final thing is a documentary that if people haven't seen this, I really think they should, called Los Angeles Plays Itself.
Right.
It's like 2-3 hours. It's about every movie that's ever shot in LA where they're representing LA in LA, like Collateral will be that. And it's just a fascinating history of the city, history of the movie industry. They screen it here in LA at some repertory theaters every month. It's incredible film. I highly recommend that. Those are mine. What about you?
Yeah, I was surprised that you didn't put that one on the list. I thought you would.
It's so good. It's so good. It was tough for me not to. But Swingers is the one that hurt the most, but this would be like the number 5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had a few noir ones. So Sunset Boulevard, Double Indemnity, and then
I love those
really
movies.
wanted like a kind of a regular romantic sort of lonely movie. And Enough Said was another one that I had on my list. I think that's sort of it. Because, this is the hard part, right? Like we're not making list of top LA movies, and I think a lot of those other movies that you mentioned, they would be on my list. But when you put your own personal sort of angle to it, then the list is a little bit different. So yeah.
Fair. I mean, I guess, I've lived here for longer than I've lived everywhere else. So I think that also speaks to the fact that like I've seen so many other parts and there's so many movies that kind of reflect LA to me that it was harder for me than like, a city that I've barely lived. If we ever do a Seattle episode, that'll be a short list for both of us, I feel like.
Well, we might do a part 2 on LA, but yeah, that's our episode. I hope you loved listening to our movies and thinking about LA. And if you live in LA, maybe got a new perspective or agreed or disagreed with us, or if you have never visited LA, hopefully you found a reason to go visit LA, because we both are, I can say that for you too, we are fans of LA. And
oh yeah, definitely.
LA gets a bad rep often, but I think more and more in the last few years, when I meet people at dinners or what have you, I'm seeing more and more people say good things about LA, which I think is positive. So yeah.
Cool. Well, it's great discussion. And yeah, please everyone just subscribe, follow, rate, all those things. Tell folks about us. People that live in LA, send them the episode, get their thoughts. And until next time, Karan, talk to you later.
Talk to you later. Bye.